Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin Shaw, Alex Wolf. If it feels like we just talked to you, it's because we did. We dropped a big episode this morning summing up all the biggest trade deadline rumors about the Knicks as of last night. But Alex, it's a new day. It is the day, and we have some breaking news.
Yeah, there's reports from Ian Begley, Brian Windhorst, Woj, the big guy, Mike Scotto of Basketball Insiders, I believe. Lots of reporting going on everywhere right now. So talk about Cam Reddish and that he might be on the move, despite the fact that he's barely gotten any playing time in New York. Just a general sense of whether the Knicks are working on some deals. And the Lakers coming up quite a bit, whether it's for Cam Reddish or otherwise, in talks with the Knicks right now. So we'll get into that next on this little bonus episode of Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I am Gavin Shaw, a play-by-play broadcaster, back at it the last couple of weeks. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website out there. And it is trade deadline day. I know NBA has a lot of games on Christmas, but to me, this is real NBA Christmas. This is when it all gets super duper fun. And the New York Knicks, to the surprise of all, are actually seemingly going to be involved today. I believe Mike Scotto might have had the report first, but I'm going with our guy, Ian Begley, because we're big fans of his. So Ian this morning writing an article saying the Los Angeles Lakers have been aggressive in their pursuit of Cam Reddish as the trade deadline approaches. You almost wonder why they weren't aggressive in trading him from the Atlanta Hawks, probably because they didn't have a first-round pick that they could give up in near history. And members of the Knicks organization have been doing their due diligence on Goran Dragic as the teams talk about potential trades per SNY sources. One deal that has been discussed leading up to Thursday was a 3-team trade involving Nerlens Noel, Talen Horton-Tucker to the Toronto Raptors, and Cam Reddish and Alec Burks to the Los Angeles Lakers, and Dragic in draft compensation to New York, according to SNY sources. As of Thursday morning, this is important to note, not much progress has been made towards a deal. We can use this in conjunction with another report from Brian Windhorst saying the Knicks are close on some deals. They're looking to move 1, 2, or 3 of the veterans. Knicks are looking to have cap space this summer. And then a final note from Woj, right now the deals the Lakers are really looking at are around the fringes, players like Alec Burks in New York, Dennis Schroeder in Boston, any number of role players, fringe starters that they may be able to cobble together the assets to go get. So Alex, I don't know where you're at on all this. To me, that first big hypothetical trade is the most fascinating one because I'm thinking, show me the money. What is the draft compensation that the Knicks are going to get in that kind of deal that would trump what they just traded for Reddish? And if they're not going to get more than that, why would they be interested?
Yeah, so it was Mike Scotto did have this on Twitter at like 3 a.m. last night, that deal that you mentioned from Begley too. And I mistakenly attributed him a second ago. He's with Hoops Hype now. I think I was about 3 years behind on where he's currently plying his trade. But so the interesting part with that deal, I figure I'll just clarify this first. Like, I saw people were confused last night about, aren't there rules in place that the Knicks aren't allowed to trade Cam Reddish for like 2 months after getting him? And there are, but there are also loopholes in that, or I guess there's other rules in place. So he can't be aggregated with another player in a trade. So you can't, technically speaking, pair Cam Reddish and Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel together and send them out in a trade. You can send Cam Reddish out essentially in a separate trade where if you can find someone that can 1-to-1 salary match him or come, close enough within the bounds of NBA trades, then you can make that happen. That's where Kendrick Nunn comes in. Probably he would probably just be salary match for the Lakers and Knicks to essentially accomplish a small side deal where they just do that in addition to the overarching bigger deal where they would send out Noel and Alec Burks, get back Goran Dragic, which would be enough salary to make that work. And then on the Lakers end, Talen Horton-Tucker, I guess would be enough to make that work. Well, that would be enough to make that work for them because they don't have to receive more salary than what they're sending out. So as long as it worked for everybody else involved, it would work for the Lakers as well. Where I stand with the actual deal, I mean, I was trying to work the rationale of this in my head last night, and I could sort of see the rationale from the Knicks perspective, I guess. I think it sort of comes down to like, was Reddish all along just an asset play, like a way of getting someone that they thought might be more valuable than the first round pick that they gave up to get him, essentially? And if that's the case, and they wind up trading him and getting back, the reports were picks with the S. I would assume that's not multiple first round picks, but let's say that they're able to get it would have to be the Lakers giving up the picks in this scenario. So if the Lakers are willing to give up, say, like their 2027 first round pick, which is the only one they have available right now, even if it has some protections on it, like top 5 protected or something like that, then, you've taken a top 18 protected Charlotte pick and effectively turned it into a top 5 protected Lakers pick in 2027 that gives you more long-term value to potentially include it in trades, and that sort of thing. Whereas the Charlotte pick, there was a chance it could convey this year, but if nothing else, would probably convey by like next year. So, that's sort of where I stand on it. If it's just an asset play, cool. I probably would have liked to have been able to see what Cam Reddish could have done more. But if the Knicks never really viewed it that way, then I would understand it. Because the Lakers were in on Reddish when he was with the Hawks as well and just didn't get him. So maybe the Knicks just saw this opportunity to be like, well, we'll pay the initial cost right now, but then we'll get the negotiating power at the table at the deadline in a few weeks and get to squeeze a little more out of the Lakers, in addition to having another player in Alec Burks that they would be interested in as well.
Yeah, I think I'm dubious, obviously, that this gets done. And I mean, Ian even wrote in a story that so far those talks haven't really progressed, because I do think the Knicks front office is interested in Cam Reddish. I just don't know if Tom Thibodeau is interested in Cam Reddish. And that we talked about that yesterday, that there's a pretty clear disconnect there. And I think if you're the Knicks front office, you're saying, hey, this is a guy with some definable upside, even if there are some real flaws in his game, like someone at that size who can move that way, who, I mean, clearly you can just look at his free throw percentage, has pretty strong shooting touch. I think over his first couple of games with the Knicks, even though he, by and large, objectively has not played very well, has shown some really good defensive instincts, has shown some of that ball handling, has had moments of good passing. I like the way he's played off of RJ. Like, I understand what they're seeing there. And I think in Tibbs's mind, he's saying, this guy does not help me win to the same extent that an Alec Burks helps me win, or I'm a different position, or Nerlens Noel helps me win. So it's interesting that the Knicks would almost be willing to wipe the slate clean with both those schools of thought and saying, all right, we're going to trade away the vets and we're going to trade away the guy who we wanted to get more minutes. Theoretically, you trade Burks, you trade Reddish, that opens up Quinn Grimes to all of a sudden be playing 36 minutes a night, which I know, Alex, you and I wouldn't necessarily mind, and we'd both be on board with. But I think it's a long shot that the Knicks actually go through with that, mostly because I doubt that they'll actually get the kind of draft compensation that makes that move worthwhile. The alternate perspective on that, though, is what Windhorst said, is that the Knicks want cap space this summer, and they see moving Reddish, even if they get, let's just say it's a neutral asset, like let's just say they get a top 15 protected Raptors first round pick instead of the top 15 protected Hornets first round pick. Maybe the Knicks see it as a straight up positive to get off Burks and Nerlens, because there's another move they have in mind this summer.
Yeah, well, I'll rebut that in just a moment, because I do think that mostly the move, I don't think it's so much about Reddish as it is about moving off the cap space if they have someone, which we'll probably bring the name up in just a moment, in mind. But Gavin, do you want to real quick let everybody know about Bet Online and what they have going on right now with the big game coming up this weekend?
Well, you know what, Alex? BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple of weeks, betonline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts.
And this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why would you want to endure all the pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning about your car and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? Your computers have access to rockauto.com at home, and your cell phone's a computer too, right in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why would you want to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? You don't want to be buying from there. Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices are reliably low for every customer, not just if you are a mechanic. You get the same price that anybody else gets. That's the Rock Auto guarantee. So if you want to get some parts for your car, go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you if you decide to pull the trigger on a part for your car. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So, yeah, Gavin, I teased it just a moment ago, but I basically think this move, if the Knicks do it, essentially I feel like they would look at it as, if they manage to get a protected first-round pick, whoever it's from, somewhere further down the line, they're going to look at that and just say, like, okay, we came out, I think this front office is very concerned with coming out net neutral on things. And I like that. I actually like that they generally are like, we're not going to give up anything of our own. And if we give up other stuff, we only want it to be extras that we've gotten in trades, So I think that they're sort of looking at it as like, we're managing to kick this Charlotte pick down the line a little bit. And we're clearing up the cap space, getting rid of Burks, getting rid of Noel. Like Noel, honestly, at this point, with how he's played this year, I think is sort of a negative value contract. Burks, I still think, is a positive value, despite his struggles at the rim and everything this year. A guy that can do what he can, that we've seen that he can do on defense when he's engaged, that we've seen what he can do shooting the ball. The fact that he can erupt in the playoffs and potentially win you a playoff game, it's very valuable for teams. So I think his contract is fine. But then, using Cam essentially to just sort of move the first round pick further down the line, I guess, while also getting off that money for this offseason, they're like a very small salary dump away from probably being able to give Jalen Brunson whatever it is he wants this offseason. And if that's a guy that they're not getting this trade deadline, which it seems like that's probably the case, then I would assume if they're starting to clear money for this coming offseason, that Brunson is the target and that's who they're clearing the money for. And if that's the case, I'm not really mad at it at all, even if it means that we never really got a shot at Cam Reddish, because I would, if you gave me in a vacuum, would you rather have Cam Reddish or Jalen Brunson on the Knicks? I would say Jalen Brunson like 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm with you on that, and maybe it'll be telling if the Knicks do execute some of these moves, and on the surface they look kind of puzzling, and you're like, all right, well, they didn't really get fair value for this and that. And to be clear, I think the Raptors and the Lakers are both teams that you can really apply a bit of pressure to, less so the Raptors than the Lakers, but the Lakers are so desperate for any kind of upgrade on the margins. They really want to salvage this season. Even if it was LeBron who orchestrated the Russell Westbrook trade, things don't look great on Rob Pelinka right now, right? Like this offseason was an abject disaster. Like you can imagine how good that team would be if they just sort of kept their core from the last 2 years in place. KCP, Kuzma, Caruso. I think they'd be a legitimate finals contender. And right now they're far from that. So I think they're trying to do anything they can to salvage their season. Even if Alec Burks isn't a game changer, I think you could really, or Cam Reddish isn't a game changer, I think you could really press the Lakers into giving up something juicy in terms of a future pick. And Toronto, not really the same story because they have such a young team and they are playing so well, but they really could use a rim protecting center to round out their team. They had interest in Nerlens Noel over the summer. So to your point, I think there's something here in terms of the Knicks getting positive value in and of itself. But if the Knicks make a trade that seems more neutral value, the upshot of that is that it indicates that they have a real good feel for, to your point, probably specifically Brunson's interest. And I shouldn't even say a real good feel. I should say a positive feeling, because the Knicks, given their connections to Brunson, given that Leon Rose's son is his agent, I think the Knicks know one way or another if Jalen Brunson wants to be in New York after this year. Final note on all this for me. I'm kind of interested in the idea of getting Goran Dragic in the trade. Granted, I think there's a decent chance if they do that, they will ultimately buy Dragic out and just let him go to the contender of his choice, because that's probably what Dragic wants to do at this point in his career. But I think at times, like, obviously Dragic isn't changing the next season in terms of their playoff trajectory, whether or not they make the play-in. But I think at times it's underrated how essential it is for the development of younger guys, namely RJ Barrett, but even Julius Randle production, to have high-level point guard play. Kemba Walker has not been able to provide that this year. I think Dragic, especially at his advanced age, is sort of a better fit as kind of a caretaker guy who could just get his teammates the ball in the right spots and set them up for success. Granted, he hasn't really played this whole year, so we don't really know what he looks like at age 35, but he is just 2 years removed from being one of the best players on the Heat team that made a finals run. So I'd be interested to see what he could do on the Knicks. And I think he'd be a real buoy for the Knicks young guys if they traded for him and decide to keep him.
Yeah, I think so too. That said, I don't like, I mean, if he has not suited up yet for a Raptors team that is, doing pretty good right now. Like, I think they just passed the Nets in the standings the other day. If he hasn't suited up for them yet, I really doubt he's going to suit up for the Knicks. He's going to be waiting for that buyout to send him to Dallas. That said, the Knicks, out of pure spite, might just be like, well, nope, we're not going to buy you out. So either suit up or don't, but you're going to sit till the summer if you're not going to play for us. They also might not be as tolerant of that as the Raptors have been so far this year. I think the Raptors have been paying him all year, even though there's been reports that he might be working out in Miami and all this other stuff, like with the Heat still. So if that's the case, and he decides, I'm just not even going to show up to the facility, the Knicks might be like, well, okay, we're not going to pay you either, and that's that. And you're out this summer, that's fine, but we're not going to like buy you out and send you to Dallas. Given how things have generally gone in the Leon Rose era, I would assume that they would probably be a little more PR friendly than that. But given the ties that he's had to the Mavericks, as a fan, I would love if the Knicks basically picked him up and were like, play for us or don't play at all, but we're not letting you go to the Mavericks for free. Because what good does it do us, really, ultimately, like, to do that for you? And, it does nothing for us. Like, we're not going to do that. Unless it softens the Mavericks up and they go, all right, well, we won't fight as hard to keep Brunson now, or something like that, which maybe that would be the case. I don't know. Either way, it'll be interesting to watch that all unfold. I did just want to throw one final note out there. This was from Woj himself. This was, you mentioned some of the other things that he had said in regards to the Alec Burks move, the fact that Dennis Schroeder is on the Lakers' radar again, ironically, after Schroeder turned down a giant contract extension from them last year and then found himself only accepting like a $5 million deal this year. But Woj did also say the idea of a Westbrook trade, nothing is impossible, but I think it's highly unlikely as far as the Knicks are concerned. Music to my ears. I'm tired of all the clickbaity crap implying that the Knicks should take on Westbrook for like a lottery protected 2027 pick or something to eat another 30 million of whatever toxic BS comes with having Russell Westbrook on your team at this point. No, thank you. I do not want the Knicks to get Westbrook. Let's just put that baby to bed right now. And I'm glad to hear that apparently that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so that's a happy note to end on. We'll wrap up this edition of Locked On Knicks. If the Knicks do make a deal, we will be back with more coverage. You can check that out both on the Locked On Knicks channel and on the Locked On NBA channel from 2 to 4. You can join our entire fantastic crew for the best of trade deadline. John Corrales, Kim Becker, Josh Lloyd, and we will be on there as well if and when the Knicks make a trade. But until then, for Alex, I'm Gavin Shaw. Peace out.